Hello students, myself Dr. Prashant Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Business Administration, Government Lohia College, Churu. In this video, you can see the title of this video is The Payment of Wages Act 1936. In this video, we are going to discuss about object and scope of this act. This act means the Payment of Wages Act 1936. The Payment of Wages Act 1936 is a central legislation. It means it is derived by central government. This act applies to the person employed in the factories and to person employed in industrial or other establishment specified in sub-clauses A to G of section 2 of this act. This act means the Payment of Wages Act 1936. The Payment of Wages Act 1936 was derived to regulate the payment of wages to certain classes of person employed in industry. Employed in industry, it means those persons employed in industrial or other establishment specified in subclauses A to G of section 2 of this act. And it is essentially meant for the benefits of industrial employees not getting very high salaries, and the provisions of the act were enacted to safeguard their interest. It means it is much better for those persons employed in industrial or establishments. This act also provides against irregularities in the payment of wages and unauthorized deduction in terms of employers. So this act is very useful for not only for students, not each and every person having interest in the knowledge about the Payment of Wages Act 1936. This act is divided in three parts. There are three parts in this act: part 1, part 2, and part 3. Now uh, we now we get details about part 1. Part 1 deals with the regulation and payment of wages by the employer. It means if you want to know about the regulation and payment of wages by the employer, then you should go with part first. Now we are going to discuss about part second. Part second specifies the heads under with deduction are to be made from wages. It means if you want to know about the deductions are to be made from wages, then you should go with part second. Now the turn is for part third. Part third provides basic details and a system for enforcing specific claims arising out of delayed payment deduction from wages and appeals and related aspects. It means if you want to know about the system for enforcing specific claims and delayed payment deduction and appeals, then you should go with part third. So this is a act in terms of payment of wages, and it is a self-contained act, and this act provides systematic presentation of payment of wages and enforcing specific claim related system and payment deduction from wages system and related appeals. So the act is divided in three parts: uh, part 1, part 2, and part third. Yeah, part 3. Now we are moving to the extent of the act. Extent of the act means extension of the act. So the Payment of Wages Act 1936 extends to the whole of India. Whole of India means it was extended to Jammu and Kashmir also, and it was extended to Jammu and Kashmir by the central government, enacting by central labor laws. And this extension of this act is provided in section 1 subsection 2 of this act, the Payment of Wages Act 1936. If you want to know about the extension of this act, then you should go with section 1 subsection 2 of this act. Now we are moving to salient features of this act. Salient features of this act means basic and general introductory details about the Payment of Wages Act 1936. This act has been enacted with the intention of timely payment of wages. It means the Payment of Wages Act 1936 was enacted with the intention of ensuring timely payment of wages. Timely payment of wages for what? Timely payment of wages to the worker and for payment of wages without unauthorized deductions, so they can get benefit with their wages. And the salary in factories or establishments or industrial units employs less than 1000 workers, and the wages the payment of wages to be paid 7th of every month, and in other cases by 10th day of every month. It means if any factory or establishment employing less than 1000 workers, then it is required to be paid 7th of every month, and in other cases then the date of payment is 10th day of every month. And the worker who either has not been paid wages in time or an authorized deduction have been made from his or her wages can file a claim. uh, Earlier we have discussed about part third, and um, you can get details. If you want to know about part third, then uh, you can derive these details from this act. And if in these terms, in this regard, many deduction procedures and deduction of from wages and appeals are included in this act. In this regard, the power of hearing in terms of appeal or deciding claims under this act, or you can say the Payment of Wages Act 1936, has been introduced uh, has been introduced with labor court or the presiding officer of a labor court. Now, the turn is for object and scope of Payment of Wages Act 1936. So, my dear students, now we are going to discuss about object and scope of the Payment of Wages Act 1936. As you all know, that every legislation has a object. Similarly, the object of the Payment of Wages Act 1936 is very clear, and the object of this act is to provide timely payment of wages uh, to the person employed in the factories and to person employed in industrial or other establishment. And the object of this act provides related deductions. Related deductions mean legal deductions which are to be made from wages. And the third part of this act deals with many systematic machinery regarding specific claims in terms of delayed payment, deduction from wages, and appeals. So, the object of the Payment of Wages Act 1936 uh, to regulate the payment of wages or to certain classes of employed person at regular interval. As earlier uh, I mm, earlier I told you that the power of hearing and deciding claims under the Payment of Wages Act 1936 has been vested with the presiding officer of a labor court. So, uh, the certain classes of employees, as we have earlier discussed about this aspect. So I think there is no need to discuss again. Uh, the object and scope provides related aspects regarding uh, employment in any factory or establishment. So the certain classes of employed means in this act doesn't apply on workers whose wages payable in respect of a wage period average rupees 600 in a month or more. So this act applies to the payment of wages uh, in certain conditions, like person employed in any factory. If a person employed in any factory, then he can get payment of wages according to the Payment of Wages Act 1936. Number one है. And number two, the person employed upon any railway by a railway administration or by a person fulfilling a contract with railway administration. It means if a person employed with railway by a railway administration or by a person fulfilling a contract with railway administration, there are two conditions: either employed by railway administration or uh, employed in a contract with railway administration. Both are eligible under this act. And the person employed in an industrial or other establishment specified in section 2a. Earlier I told you that there are many clauses and sub clauses in this act. The Payment of Act 1936 applies to the person employed in the factories and to person employed in industrial or other establishment specified in sub clauses. I told you that the sub clauses are from A to G of section 2 of this act. So the section 2 of this act provides many clauses regarding Payment of Wages Act 1936. And remaining content is the cap for applicability of Payment of Wages Act 1936 increased to rupees 18,000 in the month of September 2012. Earlier it was 10,000, but in the month of September 2012, the cap for applicability of Payment of Wages Act 1936 has been increased to 18,000 by central government. And the date was 11th September, and the month date was 11th and month September and year 2012. So object and scope relates with person employed in any factory, person employed upon any railway by a railway administration, or a person fulfilling a contract with railway administration, person employed in an industrial or other establishment specified in section 2a. And the capping limit of Payment of Wages Act is also very important in this regard.